Welcome to the show. We have a great show today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. This month of October, we've made a lot of just kind of fun and frivolous projects. If you've been following along, you've also seen a lot of pumpkin mayhem and a few other little tests of the builds we've done. But as I've been working on some of these really kind of off-the-wall projects, there is a project I was working on a year ago that I never quite finished. And it's been looking at me kind of jealously while I work on all these new crazy builds. So I finally decided that to wrap up the month of October, I should really finish up my metallic scorpion creature thing. You'll notice that he's not entirely anatomically correct, really not even close to anatomically correct. He's got 6 legs instead of 8, and I'm probably going to wind up putting we'll see here in a minute. But you can see the construction style here. He's welded together from pieces of rebar and some steel tube. And I just cut different lengths and fit them together to make legs the way that I thought they should look. And then just kind of tack welded things in place. I won't go into too much detail on the process of how I did that. I might do a build in the future where I go step by step through the process. But the next one I would do probably quite a bit differently than I did this one. This was really one of my very first metal projects ever. And so I still didn't really have a good sense of the overall aesthetics of what I was trying to achieve. But I still feel like it came together pretty well. So I'm going to finish it out here. And what I've chosen to do that with is this old broken pair of, garden shears or something. No, they're not claws or pinchers like a scorpion would have, but they do make kind of a wicked-looking defensive or offensive pair of limbs for this sort of industrial punk scorpion thing. Now, I noticed pretty quickly that the handle part wasn't really going to fit right inside. I thought about cutting off the handle and just putting the forward portion in there, but instead I decided I would bend the handles of each of these blades, and that didn't work very well at my first try, and I should have known that it wasn't going to work. I'm sure this is hardened steel, and so I kind of gave up on that. I also didn't want to crack or break these things, so I gave up on that. And as you can see here, I brought it over and put it in my vise and then just used a torch to heat it up. And, this is a regular propane torch. You could do this quicker with oxyacetylene or oxypropane, but it really only took a couple of minutes. Remember, I'm not trying to get this up to a red heat. I'm just trying to soften up the steel enough that it's flexible to where I can pound it with the hammer and straighten it out. So when I started to see that blue oxidation color kind of coming into the areas where there was bare steel, I knew that I was approaching that 500-600 degrees. I think it's right in there that you start to get that blue. That's definitely a good high temper and sufficient heat that I can wail on this thing a little bit with the hammer, and it's, I'm not going to have to worry about it breaking. So once I had those straightened out, I fit them back into the scorpion, and it took me a couple tries to get it placed exactly how I wanted it. See, I want these to be both kind of claws, but also the inner parts up there where it fits into the body of the scorpion. It reminded me of sort of like the jaws of a spider or something, so I thought that was kind of cool. I would kind of leave that there and then put some kind of a face, like even just a couple of eyes or something above them. But first I have to get these welded in. So it's a little bit tricky because it's just kind of an odd fit. It's a little bit tricky to get these held in place. I tried a few different things. I tried just wedging it in with using one of the blades to kind of wedge the other one in place, and then that didn't work real well. I tried a magnet. That didn't work real well. So I kind of bounced around and tried a couple different things, and then finally I just decided I would sort of quickly get a tack weld on one of them, see if I liked the position that it wound up in, and then basically do the same for the other side. Now, somehow I had forgotten to put on good shoes, so I had kind of a rude awakening about 2 or 3 seconds into my welding there when my toes started screaming at me. And I looked down and I had to kick sparks and ash and stuff off of my socks. But fortunately, there were no severe burns. But I do recommend that you never, under any circumstance, weld like this. Totally dumb. Don't do it. Needless to say, I took some additional precautions before I continued with the welding. One of the really nice things about having a welder is that you don't ever really have to throw anything away, or anything made of steel. You can always use it on some little project somewhere at some time. And I think I've mentioned before, like when you're making knives, sometimes you'll have an odd little scrap left over. You don't know quite what to do with it. And that's when you think, hey, I'll make a neck knife, or something like that. But sometimes you have a piece that's just tiny and seems worthless. And you think, oh, I'll just throw that away. But if you do have a welder and you like to do any of this kind of industrial sculpture, garden sculpture, and whatever kind of stuff, it is kind of fun to save those pieces and see if you can, fit them into another project later. And that's actually essentially where the face comes from for this guy. That was a test that I was doing on the durability of quenched rebar. So I had a piece of that left over, and I figured, hey, that's perfectly good steel. I'll use that to put a face on my scorpion. For me, this is really the fun part of, it's all fun, but one of the parts I really enjoy about doing metal sculpture is just kind of innovating solutions as you go. Like, I want this piece to be here. How do I get it to stay there? And then weld it in place. And then, oh, it's not quite right. So I'll, put another weld on there. And when it's hot, I'll move it back into, and just kind of that monkeying around and tinkering and getting things just the way you want them. Maybe finding the right scrap pieces to put in place to make something like this work. Coming up with an idea, I had to come up with an idea for what the eyes were going to be like. Will I put 4 eyes on there or 8 eyes, or will I have, will I use nuts or bolts or something like that to be the eyes? And then I kind of hit on the idea of just putting a little plate on there above the mandibles, getting that welded up in a way that it looked reasonably symmetrical. And then building the eyes basically just by making a little tack weld and then a little tack on top of that, a little tack on top of that, and just building up some welding bead there. And I think that worked out pretty well. I like the look of it. When I showed it to my kids, right away they said, oh, you put eyes on it. So I'm like, okay, good. I'm not the only one who can see that this thing has eyes. So once the welding's done, basically all I need to do is clean up. I'm still debating whether I would paint this thing, or I kind of wanted to, because I have this really good, really dark, like a charcoal metallic paint. And I really like that stuff, but at the same time, I have the feeling that this guy's going to just rust and develop this like grungy patina, and he's just going to look so cool if I just leave him be, maybe even leave him out in the rain a little bit and let him build up a little rust. I think he could wind up being like a really cool, I don't know, maybe a fixture of the garden or something else. But he will definitely spend some time in my shop too. So. But that's about it. There's obviously a lot more work I could do. This is a pretty ugly rendition of a scorpion, spider, insect thing. My welding obviously could use a lot of work. If I had a TIG welder and knowledge of how to use one, I could have made much better welds. But it's fun as an experiment to take some scraps and put them together and see what you can get out of it. So that's about it for October. I guess I really can't stretch this any further. But we do have to have one more bit of pumpkin mayhem, don't we? I'll just show some of the footage from the other videos we've done this month. And with each one, I will link to that video. So I'll probably do 2 or 3 here at the end. Be sure to stay tuned for those. And also subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, or at least consider it. We're putting videos up about 2 or 3 times a week. I really try to have a lot of fun with this channel. I've done some blacksmithing and, knife making, bladesmithing, some of those kind of projects, but we mix it up and do some other crazy stuff too. So thanks again. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in the next video.